I haven't eaten in 2 days." The little girl said it very softly, almost like a whisper. Her small hands clutching a torn teddy bear, her teary blue eyes looking up at the man standing in front of her. No one in the dark alley of Chicago dared to look at him directly. A mafia boss that even the police were wary of. A perfect black suit, cold eyes. The bodyguards behind him knew that with just a single nod from him, everything could be over in a few seconds. But right now, standing before him, was only a thin little girl, her cheeks dirty with tears trembling in the cold. She didn't know who he was. She didn't know that the man standing before her could give an order that would make the entire city tremble. She only knew that she was hungry. And when the mafia boss bent down and looked straight into those innocent eyes, everything in the alley suddenly fell silent. No one knew what he was thinking, but what made everyone present freeze in shock was the mafia boss's next action. An action that many years later all of Chicago would still talk about. But why would a powerful and ruthless man like him change completely because of just one sentence from a child? If this story touched your heart, take a moment to reflect on the quiet power of kindness, especially when no one else chooses to show it. Share your thoughts in the comments and tell us where you're watching from. Which city and country are you in, and what time is it there right now? It's always amazing to see how stories like this connect people from all over the world. If moments like this remind you of the beauty of humanity, please like the video and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss more powerful stories that celebrate compassion, courage, and the simple acts of kindness that can change a life. October 2025 in Chicago felt colder than the calendar promised. The wind off Lake Michigan sliced through the streets like a reminder that winter was already sharpening its teeth. Vincent Russo stepped out of the black armored SUV at the edge of his Gold Coast estate, the heavy iron gates closing behind him with a soft final click that echoed in the quiet night. He was 48, fair-skinned, broad-shouldered, his dark hair streaked with silver that had appeared too early. Tonight the silver seemed heavier. A fresh bandage wrapped his left side beneath the tailored charcoal overcoat. Nothing dramatic, just a graze from a confrontation earlier that day on the south side. The kind of thing that happened when old rivalries flared without warning. He limped slightly up the wide stone steps, each movement pulling at the wound. The mansion loomed before him, 3 stories of limestone and leaded glass floodlights washing the facade in pale gold. Inside, the foyer was silent, except for the distant tick of a grandfather clock. No staff greeted him. He had sent them home hours ago. He preferred the emptiness when the weight in his chest pressed hardest. Vincent paused in the marble hallway, leaning one hand against the cool wall. The house smelled of polished wood and faint cigar smoke from the study he rarely used anymore. He closed his eyes for a moment, and the memory came unbidden, his wife Elena laughing in this same foyer 8 years earlier, twirling in a summer dress before everything shattered. A rival cruise car bomb. She had been gone before the sirens arrived. The guilt had never left him. It had simply burrowed deeper, gnawing like the old bullet scar on his shoulder that ached in cold weather. He had built an empire from the ashes, construction contracts, real estate holdings, the legitimate face of a world few people saw clearly, but the empire could not fill the hollow space she left. He moved to the grand staircase, gripping the banister. Upstairs in the master suite, he shed the coat and shirt carefully, wincing as fabric tugged at the bandage. The mirror across from the bed reflected a man who looked carved from stone, sharp jaw, pale blue eyes shadowed with fatigue, a body that still carried the discipline of youth but now bore the marks of too many close calls. He pressed a hand to the fresh wound. It wasn't the pain that troubled him most. It was the question that followed every narrow escape. How many more times could he walk away before the ledger balanced? Downstairs again, he poured bourbon into a heavy crystal glass, 2 fingers, no ice, and carried it to the study. The room was dim, lit only by a single desk lamp, and the glow from the city beyond the tall windows. He sank into the leather chair behind the massive oak desk, staring at the framed photograph of Elena on the corner. Her smile was gentle, trusting. He had failed to protect that smile. The remorse rose like bile, hot and familiar. He set the glass down untouched. Outside, the city pulsed with its own indifferent rhythm. Sirens wailed somewhere far off. Vincent rubbed his temples. The day's confrontation replayed in fragments, a tense meeting in an alley, behind a shuttered warehouse on West Division Street. 3 men from the opposing faction had appeared without invitation words, sharp hands near coats. No shots fired this time, just threats, posturing the promise of worse to come. Vincent had stared them down until they backed away, but the encounter left him rattled in a way he hated to admit. Power was slipping, alliances fraying. And beneath it all the old guilt whispered, "You deserve whatever comes." He stood abruptly, needing air. The French doors opened onto a terrace overlooking the dark lake. Wind whipped his shirt against his skin. He leaned on the railing, breathing in the sharp metallic scent of the city. That was when he heard it faint, almost lost in the wind. A child's voice, small and trembling from somewhere below the terrace wall. Vincent froze. The estate was gated, patrolled. No one should be there. He moved to the edge, peering down into the narrow service alley that ran alongside the property. Streetlight spilled yellow across cracked pavement. A woman sat slumped against the brick wall, knees drawn up, arms wrapped around a small girl who huddled against her. The woman was thin, dangerously thin, her coat threadbare, patched in places with duct tape. Her dark hair hung limp, unwashed. The girl, perhaps 8 or 9, pressed her face into the woman's side, shivering visibly. A torn backpack lay beside them, spilling a few meager possessions: a cracked water bottle, a folded blanket worn to transparency, a child's drawing half crumpled. Vincent's first instinct was to call security. Trespassers were dealt with swiftly, but something held him. The woman's posture, shoulders hunched in defeat, yet one hand stroking the girl's hair in slow, protective circles stirred a memory he had long buried. Elena had held their niece the same way once during a family gathering when the child had been frightened by fireworks. Gentle, unyielding. He watched longer than he should have. The woman murmured something, soft words lost to the wind, but the tone was weary, soothing. The girl nodded faintly. Then the woman coughed, a dry, rattling sound that carried clearly upward. She pressed a sleeve to her mouth, shoulders shaking. When she lowered her arm, Vincent saw the smear of red on the fabric. Not much, but enough. His chest tightened. He turned back inside, grabbed his coat, and descended the service stairs 2 at a time, despite the pull on his wound. The alley door opened with a metallic groan. Cold air rushed in. The woman startled, pulling the girl closer. Her eyes, wide, dark, exhausted, locked on him. Fear flashed across her face, raw and immediate. She tried to stand, but her legs buckled. She caught herself against the wall, breath coming in shallow gasps. "Stay back," she whispered, voice hoarse. "Please. We're leaving." "We didn't mean to." Vincent raised both hands slowly, palms out. "I'm not here to hurt you." She didn't relax. Her gaze darted to the mansion behind him, then back to his face. Recognition flickered. Perhaps she had seen his picture in the papers, the occasional headline about the successful businessman whose name carried weight in certain circles. She swallowed hard. The girl peeked out, eyes enormous in a too-thin face. She clutched a small stuffed bear, missing one ear. Vincent felt something crack inside him, sharp and unexpected. He had seen suffering before, plenty of it, but this was different. This was quiet grinding, the kind that happened in the shadows while the city looked the other way. "What's your name?" he asked, keeping his voice low. The woman hesitated. "Elena," she said finally. Then softer, "Elena Harper. This is my daughter, Lily." Vincent's breath caught at the name. Coincidence, nothing more. But it landed like a blow. He glanced at the child Lily, whose gaze met his without flinching, curious despite the fear. "You're hurt," he said, nodding toward the blood on her sleeve. "It's nothing," Elena murmured. "Just cold nights. We lost our place 3 weeks ago. Landlord changed the locks. Eviction notice came faster than we expected." Her voice cracked. "We were trying to get to the shelter, but it's full tonight. Again." Vincent's mind raced. The unfairness of it struck him absurd, brutal. A mother and child reduced to an alley while he stood in a house with more empty rooms than he could count. The guilt twisted deeper. He had the means to change this moment. He always had. Yet he had never used it for anything beyond survival and control. "Come inside," he said. It wasn't a question. Elena's eyes widened. "No, we can't. You'll freeze out here." He stepped closer, careful not to loom. "There's heat, food, a place to rest. No strings." She searched his face, suspicion warring with desperation. Lily tugged at her sleeve, whispering something. Elena closed her eyes briefly, as if gathering strength. When she opened them, tears shimmered but did not fall. "Why would you help us?" she asked, voice trembling. Vincent had no easy answer. The truth was too tangled remorse for a life built on power that could not save the ones he loved, a sudden, fierce need to protect something fragile before it broke completely. He looked at Lily again. The child's quiet trust, despite everything, pierced him. "Because no one should have to sit in an alley in October," he said simply. Elena stared at him a long moment. Then slowly she nodded. She gathered the backpack with shaking hands. Lily stood clutching her bear. Vincent led them up the service stairs through the quiet kitchen, lit only by under-cabinet lights. The warmth enveloped them like a blanket. Elena swayed slightly. He caught her elbow gently. She flinched at first, then steadied. "Sit," he said, guiding her to a stool at the island. Lily climbed onto the one beside her, eyes wide at the gleaming counters, the stainless steel appliances. He moved to the refrigerator, stocked by a chef who came twice a week, and pulled out milk bread, cheese, fruit. Simple things. He set a plate in front of Lily first. She hesitated, then took a slice of apple, nibbling carefully. Elena watched him guarded. "You don't have to do this." "I know," Vincent replied. The silence stretched heavy with unspoken questions. He poured hot water for tea chamomile, the only kind he kept for sleepless nights. When he handed Elena the mug, their fingers brushed. She pulled back quickly, but not before he saw the tremor in her hand. "You're safe here," he said. "For tonight at least." She nodded, but her eyes remained wary. Inside, Vincent felt the storm-building guilt crashing against a sudden protective instinct he had not known he still possessed. Lily looked up at him, apple juice on her chin. "Thank you, mister," she whispered. Vincent's throat tightened. He managed a small nod. Outside, the wind howled against the windows. Inside, for the first time in years, the house did not feel quite so empty. And in that small, fragile moment, something shifted in Vincent Russo's heart, quiet, irreversible, and terrifying in its intensity. The kitchen lights felt too bright after the dim alley. Elena Harper sat motionless on the tall stool, both hands wrapped around the warm mug as though it might vanish if she loosened her grip. Steam rose in slow curls from the chamomile tea. Lily perched beside her small legs, swinging slightly, the stuffed bear now resting on the marble countertop like a tiny sentinel. The child ate slowly, first the apple slice, then a piece of cheese, then half a slice of bread spread with butter. Each bite was measured, deliberate, the way someone eats when they do not know when the next meal will come. Vincent stood across the island, arms folded loosely, watching them. He had not moved since setting the food down. The house was quiet, except for the low hum of the refrigerator and the occasional tick of the clock in the hallway. He felt the bandage pull against his ribs, with every breath a dull reminder of the afternoon's encounter. But the physical ache seemed distant now, overshadowed by something sharper inside his chest. Elena lifted her eyes to him only once, then dropped them again to the mug. Her fingers were raw from cold nails bitten short. She was 32, though she looked older, hollow cheeks, shadows beneath her eyes, the color of Bruce's hair pulled back in a fraying elastic that had lost most of its stretch. Her coat, once navy, had faded to a dull gray. The zipper was broken, held closed with a safety pin. Beneath it, a thin sweater hung loose on a frame that carried too little weight for the height she once had. Malnutrition had carved lines into her face that should not appear until much later in life. Sleep deprivation had done the rest. Her eyelids drooped even as she fought to keep them open. Vincent's gaze moved to Lily. The girl was smaller than she should be at 8 years old. Her coat sleeves ended several inches above her wrists. The cuffs were frayed. Her sneakers had soles worn so thin he could see the outline of her socks through them. Yet she sat straight, polite, saying nothing unless spoken to. When she finished the bread, she wiped her mouth carefully with the back of her hand and whispered, "Thank you." The words landed softly. Vincent nodded once. Inside, something twisted violently. Gratitude from a child who should never have needed to offer it. He turned away, busying himself with the kettle again, though no one needed more tea. The motion gave him a moment to breathe through the sudden pressure behind his eyes. Elena spoke, then voice so quiet it barely carried across the island. "We won't stay long, just until morning. I'll find somewhere else when the shelters open again." Vincent set the kettle down harder than he intended. The clink echoed. "You're not going back to that alley." Her shoulders stiffened. "We've managed before." "Managed," he repeated. The word tasted bitter. He looked at her, really looked, and saw the tremor in her hands, the way she pressed her lips together to keep them from shaking. Managed meant nights on benches, on church steps and doorways when the wind cut through layers like paper. Managed meant hunger that never fully left cold, that settled into bones, fear that became a constant companion. He walked around the island slowly, stopping several feet away. "You're bleeding," he said again, nodding toward her sleeve. She glanced down as though surprised to see the stain. "It's old, from coughing. It happens when it's cold." Vincent's jaw tightened. Tuberculosis, pneumonia. Something worse. He had seen men in his world shrug off gunshot wounds, but this quiet, persistent erosion was different. It was the kind of suffering that happened in silence while the city moved on. Lily's small hand reached out and touched her mother's arm. "Mommy's okay," she said, more to reassure herself than anyone else. Elena covered Lily's hand with her own. "I'm fine, sweetheart." The lie hung between them, fragile and transparent. Vincent exhaled through his nose. "There's a guest suite upstairs. 2 bedrooms, bathroom heat that works. You can use it tonight. No one will bother you." Elena's eyes snapped to his face. Suspicion flared bright and immediate. Why, he could have given a dozen answers: charity, guilt, boredom, but none felt true. The real answer was simpler and more dangerous. Looking at them made the hollow place inside him ache in a new way. Made him remember what protection once meant. Made him want fiercely and suddenly to keep that small spark of trust in Lily's eyes from going out. "Because I can," he said. She studied him for a long moment. Then her gaze dropped to Lily, who was watching him with wide, curious eyes. No fear now, only the open wonder children sometimes carry, even after the world has tried to teach them otherwise. Elena's shoulders sagged. One night, she whispered. Just one. Vincent led them upstairs. The hallway carpet was thick, muffling their steps. He opened the door to the East Wing guest suite rooms he had not entered in years. Fresh linens, soft lighting, a king bed in one room and twin beds in the other. A bathroom larger than most apartments, with heated floors and towels folded like they belonged in a hotel. Elena stopped in the doorway, breath-catching. Lily stepped inside first, turning in a slow circle, eyes huge. Vincent lingered at the threshold. There's food in the small fridge. Water. Extra blankets in the closet. If you need anything, my room is at the end of the hall. Just knock. Elena turned to him. Tears stood in her eyes, but she blinked them back. I don't know how to thank you. You don't have to. She nodded once, then looked down at Lily. Say goodnight, sweetheart. Lily walked to Vincent, hesitated, then reached up and wrapped her thin arms around his waist in the briefest hug. Good night, mister. The contact was so light it barely registered, yet it struck him like a fist. He froze, arms half raised, then slowly lowered one hand to rest on her shoulder. Good night, Lily. When they closed the door behind them, Vincent stood in the hallway for several long minutes, listening to the soft sounds of movement inside, water running, quiet voices, the creak of bed springs. Then silence. He returned downstairs, poured another bourbon, and carried it to the terrace again. The city glittered below, indifferent. Wind tugged at his shirt. He drank slowly, letting the burn ground him. His phone buzzed on the railing. Tommy's name on the screen. Vincent answered. Yeah, boss. Trouble on the west side. They hit one of our warehouses. Nothing taken, just a message. Spray paint on the doors. Next time it's you. Vincent closed his eyes. The old rage stirred, familiar and cold. But beneath it something else burned hotter. Fear not for himself, but for the two people sleeping upstairs. People who had nothing to do with his world. People he had just invited into it. Double the watch, he said. I'll handle it tomorrow. He ended the call. The bourbon tasted like ash now. Inside his mind, the conflict roared. Part of him wanted to send them away at dawn, back to the shelters, back to the streets, back to safety from him. Another part, the part that had felt Lily's arms around him, refused. Refused to let them return to nights of wind and hunger. Refused to let Elena's cough worsen in the cold. Refused to let that small, brave trust disappear. He drained the glass and set it down hard. The wind carried the distant wail of sirens. Somewhere out there, rival crews were moving pieces on a board he had helped create. Somewhere out there, Elena and Lily had been surviving on scraps while he lived behind walls thicker than most bank vaults. The unfairness of it clawed at him, violent, unrelenting. He pressed both palms to the railing until his knuckles whitened. He would protect them. Not because he was good. Not because he deserved to. But because the alternative, watching them walk back into that misery, was no longer possible. Above him, in the guest suite, a small lamp clicked off. Darkness settled over that wing of the house for the first time in years. Vincent stayed on the terrace until the cold drove him inside. When he finally climbed the stairs to his own room, he paused outside their door. No sound, just the soft rhythm of breathing two people, finally warm, finally safe, if only for tonight. He continued to his room, closed the door, and leaned against it. The bandage on his side throbbed in time with his heartbeat. For the first time in 8 years, the house did not feel like a mausoleum. And in the silence, Vincent Russo felt the first terrifying stirrings of something he had thought long dead: hope. Fragile, dangerous, and already fierce enough to tear him apart. Morning light filtered through the heavy drapes of the guest suite in pale, hesitant stripes. Elena woke first, body stiff, from the unfamiliar softness of the mattress. For a long moment she lay still, staring at the ceiling moldings carved in elegant loops, listening to the distant hum of the city waking beyond the windows. The bed was too large, the sheets too clean, the quiet too complete. Panic rose in her throat, sharp, sudden, the kind that comes when safety feels like a trap. She turned her head. Lily slept beside her, curled on her side, one small hand clutching the edge of the pillowcase as though afraid it might disappear. The stuffed bear rested between them, its single ear pressed against Lily's cheek. Elena reached out slowly, brushing a strand of hair from her daughter's face. The child's breathing was steady, deep, the first unbroken sleep in weeks. Tears pricked Elena's eyes. She blinked them away fiercely. Crying solved nothing. She slipped from the bed, bare feet sinking into carpet so thick it felt like walking on clouds. Her own clothes, still damp from last night's chill, hung over the back of a chair. She dressed quickly, wincing at the pull of cold fabric against skin. In the bathroom mirror, she saw herself clearly for the first time in months. Hollow eyes, cracked lips, skin stretched too tight over cheekbones. She looked like someone else. Someone who had been erased bit by cold nights and empty days. Downstairs, the kitchen smelled of coffee and something warm, oatmeal perhaps. Vincent stood at the stove, sleeves rolled to his elbows, stirring a pot with careful movements that seemed at odds with the power he carried in every line of his body. He wore a simple gray sweater and dark jeans, ordinary clothes that somehow looked expensive on him. The bandage on his side was hidden now, but she remembered the way he had winced when he bent to pick up Lily's backpack last night. He glanced up as she entered. "Good morning." Elena stopped in the doorway, arms wrapped around herself. "Good morning." Her voice came out small, hesitant. She cleared her throat. We'll be going soon." "As soon as Lily wakes." Vincent turned off the burner. "There's no rush." She didn't answer. Instead, she looked around at the gleaming appliances, the bowl of fresh fruit on the island, the sunlight pouring across marble floors. The contrast clawed at her. Last week she had stood in line for 3 hours at a food pantry, only to be told they had run out of everything but dented cans of beans. Now fruit sat untouched, bright and perfect. The unfairness burned in her chest, hot, irrational, humiliating. Vincent poured coffee into 2 mugs. He set one near her without asking if she wanted it. "Cream sugar black is fine." She took the mug, fingers trembling slightly. The warmth seeped into her palms like medicine. Lily appeared, then rubbing her eyes bare tucked under one arm. She stopped when she saw Vincent, blinked, then offered a shy smile. "Hi." "Morning, Lily." Vincent's voice softened in a way that surprised even him. He set a bowl of oatmeal in front of her, topped with sliced banana and a drizzle of honey. "Eat slow. It's hot." Lily climbed onto the stool. She stared at the bowl as though it might vanish. Then she picked up the spoon and took the smallest bite. Her eyes closed for a second in something close to bliss. Elena watched, throat tight. She wanted to tell Lily not to get used to it, wanted to remind her that tomorrow they might be back on the street, back to searching for warmth in library corners or under highway overpasses. But the words wouldn't come. Vincent leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "I have business this morning," he said. "You're welcome to stay here. There's food, books, television. No one will bother you." Elena's gaze snapped to his. "We can't impose. You're not imposing." She looked down at her coffee. Suspicion warred with exhaustion. "Why are you doing this?" He didn't answer immediately. Inside, the question tore at him. Why? Because the sight of Lily eating oatmeal like it was treasure made the guilt over Elena's name, his wife's name, twist like a knife. Because he had failed to protect one family, and the thought of failing another, even strangers, was unbearable. Because in the quiet of last night he had felt something crack open inside him, something warm and dangerous and alive. "I don't know," he said finally. "But I'm not sending you back out there today." Elena's hands tightened around the mug. Tears threatened again. She swallowed them down. "We don't belong here." "You belong wherever you're safe," he replied. The words hung between them. Lily looked up, spoon paused halfway to her mouth. "Can we stay a little longer, Mommy? It's warm." Elena's heart fractured at the plea. She nodded once, barely. Vincent left shortly after. He paused at the door, coat over his arm. "If you need anything, ask the housekeeper. She'll be here at 10. Her name is Rosa." Elena nodded again. When the front door closed behind him, the house felt suddenly too large, too quiet. Outside, the city waited. Vincent slid into the back of the SUV. Tommy was already behind the wheel. "Warehouse on West Division," Tommy said. "They left another message last night. This one's personal." Vincent stared out the window. "Drive." The confrontation came faster than expected. They pulled into the alley behind the warehouse to find 3 men waiting, leather jackets, hard eyes, one holding a metal pipe loosely at his side. No guns visible. Not yet. The leader stepped forward. "Russo, you're late." Vincent got out slowly. His side ached, but he ignored it. "You wanted to talk." "Talk." The man smiled, thin and cold. "Your territory's shrinking. Thought you should know before it disappears completely." Vincent met his gaze. "You think spray paint changes boundaries. I think it changes minds." The man nodded toward the warehouse doors, fresh red letters. "Your time is up." Vincent felt the old rage rise, cold and familiar. But beneath it burned something new. Fear not for himself, but for the 2 people he had left behind in his house. People who had nothing to do with this war. People he had promised safety. He stepped closer. "You come near my property again, you won't walk away." The man laughed. Big words for a man who's bleeding under that coat. Vincent's hand twitched toward his side. He forced it still. "Leave." The 3 men exchanged glances. Then slowly they backed away. No shots, no blows. Just the promise of worse to come. In the SUV, Tommy glanced at him. "You okay?" Boss Vincent didn't answer. His mind was already back at the house, imagining Elena's guarded eyes, Lily's small smile over oatmeal. The contrast tore at him, the violence of his world against the fragile peace he had offered them. He pressed a hand to his side, feeling the bandage dampen slightly. Back at the mansion, Elena stood at the tall windows of the living room, watching the lake. Lily sat on the rug with a picture book. Rosa had brought bright illustrations of animals in a forest. The housekeeper had arrived, quietly set out lunch, then disappeared again with a kind nod. Elena's legs felt weak. She leaned against the window frame. The view was breathtaking, water stretching to the horizon, boats cutting white paths across the surface. She had never seen anything so clean, so untouched. Tears came, then silent and unstoppable. She slid down the wall until she sat on the floor, knees drawn up, forehead resting on her arms. How many nights had she held Lily in alleys, whispering promises she couldn't keep? How many times had she lied about being warm, about food coming soon? And now this safety handed to her like a gift she didn't understand. It felt wrong, terrifying, like a dream that would shatter when she woke. Lily crawled over book forgotten. She pressed against her mother's side. Mommy Elena wrapped her arms around her daughter. "I'm here. Are we going to stay? I don't know, sweetheart." Lily was quiet for a moment. Then softly, "I like it here. It's warm. And the man? He looks sad, but he's nice." Elena closed her eyes. Sad. Yes, she had seen it in Vincent's eyes last night, the same hollow look she carried in her own mirror. Two people carrying invisible weights. Two people who should never have met. Outside, Vincent's SUV pulled into the drive. He sat for a long moment before getting out, staring at the house as though it belonged to someone else. Inside him, the conflict raged fiercer now. Protect them or send them away before his world touched them, keep them safe, or admit that safety near him was an illusion. He entered quietly, heard soft voices from the living room, paused in the doorway. Elena looked up. Their eyes met. For a heartbeat, neither moved. Then Lily ran to him, arms out. "You're back," Vincent knelt without thinking. Lily hugged him, brief, fierce. He held her gently, afraid to hold too tight. Elena watched, heart pounding. Suspicion still lingered, but beneath it something warmer stirred, gratitude, fragile and growing. Trust, tentative and terrifying. Vincent looked at her over Lily's head. "You stayed." She nodded once. "For now." The words carried weight. "For now." But in that quiet room, with sunlight falling across the rug, and a child's laughter echoing softly, Vincent felt the first real crack in the walls he had built around his heart. And the crack was widening fast, unstoppable, burning, with a need to protect that he could no longer deny. The days blurred into one another, like pages turning in a book Elena never thought she would be allowed to read. 3 days became 4, then 5. Each morning she woke, expecting the dream to end, expecting Vincent to appear at the bedroom door, with polite regret, keys in hand, ready to return them to the streets. But he never did. Instead, there was always coffee brewing by the time she descended the stairs, always fresh fruit, sliced neatly on a plate, always Rosa, the housekeeper, moving quietly through the rooms with fresh towels and a gentle smile that never asked. In questions. Elena moved through the mansion like a ghost, touching nothing for fear of leaving fingerprints, speaking only when spoken to. Her body still carried the memory of cold nights spent huddled under a single blanket in abandoned doorways, wind slipping through cracks like knives. Her ribs showed beneath the borrowed sweater Rosa had left folded on the dresser. Her wrists looked fragile enough to snap. Sleep came in fragments even now. She jolted awake at every unfamiliar sound, heart hammering, certain the police, or the landlord, or some faceless authority had come to drag them back to the shelter line that stretched around the block at dawn. Lily, though, bloomed in the warmth. Color returned to her cheeks. She no longer ate with the frantic speed of someone who expected the plate to disappear. She explored the house in small, careful steps, running her fingers along the smooth banister, staring up at the crystal chandelier in the dining room, as though it were stars brought indoors. She asked questions in whispers. "Mommy, why are there so many books, Mommy? Can we keep the blanket forever?" Elena answered softly, always the same answer. "For now, sweetheart. Just for now." Vincent watched from doorways, from the edge of rooms, never intruding, but never far. He left early most mornings, black SUV pulling away before the sun fully rose, and returned late, coat dusted with the smell of autumn wind and something sharper metallic. Elena noticed the new bandages that appeared from time to time, the way he favored his left side when he thought no one was looking. She never asked. Asking felt too intimate, too dangerous. One afternoon, rain lashed the windows in gray sheets. Elena stood in the library, floor-to-ceiling shelves of leather-bound volumes she was afraid to touch, when Lily ran in, soaked from the terrace she had slipped out to explore. "Mommy, it's raining cats and dogs," Lily laughed, water dripping from her hair onto the Persian rug. Elena knelt quickly, stripping off the wet sweater. "You'll catch cold. Come here." Vincent appeared in the doorway, towel in hand. He had just returned. Rain glistened on his shoulders. Without a word, he crossed the room and draped the towel over Lily's head, rubbing gently until her hair stood in damp spikes. Lily giggled. You're tall. Vincent's mouth curved just the smallest lift at one corner. You're small. Elena watched the exchange chest tight. The sight of her daughter laughing, really laughing after months of silence and fear was almost too much. Tears burned behind her eyes. She looked away toward the rain-streaked glass, trying to steady her breathing. Vincent noticed. He always noticed. She's safe here, he said quietly. Elena swallowed. I know. I don't know how to believe it yet. He nodded once. Then to Lily, want to help me make hot chocolate. Lily's eyes widened. With marshmallows. They disappeared toward the kitchen. Elena followed slowly, leaning against the doorway, as Vincent lifted Lily onto a stool so she could reach the packets. He moved with careful patience, tearing open envelopes, stirring milk on the stove, dropping in extra marshmallows when Lily wasn't looking. The scene was so ordinary it felt surreal. A man who commanded fear in half the city, now kneeling to Lily's level to show her how to swirl the spoon just right. Elena's hands trembled. She pressed them to her sides. How many times had she stood in fast food lines, counting pennies for a single cup of coffee to warm her hands? How many nights had she whispered apologies to Lily for the hunger, for the cold, for the life she could not fix? And now this. Warmth, sweetness, safety handed over without condition. The kindness felt like a weight she did not know how to carry. That evening, after Lily fell asleep, curled on the couch with a blanket tucked around her shoulders, Elena found Vincent on the terrace. The rain had stopped. Stars pierced the sky above the lake. He stood at the railing, hands in his pockets, staring out at the dark water. She hesitated at the French doors, then stepped out. Thank you, she said softly. For today. For everything. Vincent turned. Moonlight caught the silver in his hair, the lines etched around his eyes. You don't have to thank me. I do. She wrapped her arms around herself. I've spent so long expecting the worst. It's hard to accept the best. He looked at her, really looked, and something in his expression shifted. Pain, raw and unguarded. I know what it's like to lose everything, he said quietly. To wake up one day and realize the person you were supposed to protect is gone, and you're still here, breathing, when you shouldn't be. Elena's breath caught. She had sensed the grief in him from the first night, the hollow look, the careful distance, but hearing it spoken aloud made it real. I'm sorry, she whispered. Don't be. His voice was rough. Just let me do this. Let me keep you both safe. For as long as you'll stay. The words landed like a promise. Elena felt tears spill over before she could stop them. She wiped them away quickly, embarrassed. I don't know how long that will be. As long as it takes, he said. Inside Vincent, the conflict roared louder than ever. Every moment he spent near them deepened the ache. He wanted to shield them from the shadows he carried from the late-night calls, the coded messages, the men who waited in alleys with messages written in paint and threat. Yet sending them away felt like betrayal, like failing Elena, his wife, again. The guilt was violent now, tearing at the edges of his composure. The next morning brought trouble. Vincent's phone rang before dawn. Tommy's voice tight. They're moving on the north side storage. 2 cars. Armed. They want to sit down. Now. Vincent, dressed in silence, kissed Lily's forehead while she slept soft, careful, then left without waking. Elena. The confrontation unfolded in an empty parking lot behind a shuttered factory. 4 men waited under sodium lights, coats open to show holsters. The leader, a man named Marco, once an ally, stepped forward. You're losing ground, Russo. Time to negotiate. Vincent stood motionless. You think threats change facts? Marco smiled. I think facts change when people bleed. Vincent's hand rested near his side, habit not threat. Walk away. Marco laughed. Or what? You gonna call your new charity case for backup? The words hit like a slap. Vincent's vision narrowed. They knew. Somehow they knew about Elena and Lily. The knowledge ignited something feral in him, protective, primal, unstoppable. He stepped closer, voice low. You come near my house, near them, you won't walk away. Ever. Marco studied him, saw the shift, backed off slowly. Your funeral. They left. Vincent stood in the empty lot until the taillights disappeared. His hands shook not from fear, but from the sheer force of the emotion surging through him. Love. Fierce burning from the very first moment he had seen them in that alley. Love for a child who trusted him without reason. Love for a woman who carried her pain with quiet dignity. Love that terrified him because it made him vulnerable. Made him human. He returned home as the sun rose. Elena was in the kitchen making toast, simple, careful, as though afraid to use too much. She looked up when he entered. You're hurt, she said, seeing the fresh tension in his posture. Not today, he answered, but his voice cracked. She crossed the room slowly, stopped in front of him. Vincent. He looked down at her, thin, weary, yet standing tall. Something inside him broke open completely. He reached out slow, giving her time to pull away, and brushed a tear from her cheek with his thumb. "I won't let anything happen to you," he whispered. "Either of you." Elena's breath hitched. She did not pull away. Instead, she leaned just slightly into the touch. Trust, fragile and growing, bloomed between them like the first green after winter. In the quiet kitchen, with sunlight falling across the counter and Lily's soft footsteps approaching from the hallway, Vincent felt the walls he had built crumble further. Not with violence, with kindness. And the fall was terrifying, and beautiful, and irreversible. October slipped toward its end in Chicago, the days growing shorter, the light thinner, the wind carrying a sharper bite off the lake. Inside the mansion, time felt suspended. Meals appeared at regular hours. Lights stayed on through the evenings. Laughter from Lily echoed down hallways that had known only silence for years. Elena moved through it all with the careful steps of someone walking on thin ice, waiting for the crack. She folded borrowed clothes with trembling hands, helped Rosa dust shelves she barely dared touch, read to Lily from picture books in the sunlit library, until her voice grew hoarse. Each small act of normalcy felt stolen, borrowed against a debt she could never repay. Vincent came and went like a shadow, leaving before dawn, returning after dark, always with the faint scent of rain or exhaust clinging to his coat. He spoke little of his days, but Elena saw the new shadows under his eyes, the way he pressed a hand to his side when he thought she wasn't watching, the quiet moments when he stood at the terrace railing, staring at nothing. She wanted to ask, wanted to offer the same gentle care he had given them. But fear held her tongue, fear that asking would break whatever fragile balance kept them here. One evening, the sky turned the color of bruises. Vincent returned earlier than usual, coat unbuttoned, tie loosened. He found Elena in the kitchen, stirring soup on the stove, chicken broth with vegetables Rosa had left chopped earlier. Lily sat at the island, coloring a picture of a house with too many windows. Vincent stopped in the doorway. "Smells good." Elena glanced over her shoulder. "It's just soup. Nothing special." "It's special to us," he said quietly. Lily looked up, crayon paused. "Want some, Vincent?" He managed a small smile. "Later. I need to talk to your mom first." Elena turned off the burner. Her heart gave a sudden painful thud. She wiped her hands on a dish towel, soft, clean, smelling faintly of lavender, and followed him to the study. The room was dim, lit only by the desk lamp, and the glow from the city beyond the tall windows. Vincent closed the door behind them. He leaned against the edge of the desk, arms folded, eyes fixed on the floor. "I have to leave tonight," he said. "Business. It might be complicated." Elena's stomach dropped. "How long?" "Overnight. Maybe longer." He looked up then. "You'll be safe here. Rosa stays. Security's doubled. No one gets through the gates." She nodded slowly. "We've been safe before. We can be again." The words came out steady, but inside she felt the old terror rising, cold wind, empty pockets. Lily's small hand in hers as they walked past closed shelters. The mansion suddenly felt too big, too empty without him in it. Vincent stepped closer. "Elena, if anything happens, if you hear anything strange, go to the safe room in the basement. Code's 1120. You'll be fine." She searched his face. "You're scared," he exhaled sharply. "I'm careful." "No." She shook her head. "You're scared. For us." He didn't deny it. The silence stretched heavy with everything unsaid. "I can't lose you both," he whispered. "Not after." He didn't finish. Didn't need to. Elena understood. The ghost of his wife lingered in every quiet corner of this house, her name, her absence, the guilt he carried like a second skin. She reached out, hesitant, trembling, and touched his arm. "We'll be here when you get back." Vincent covered her hand with his. The contact was brief, electric. Then he stepped away, grabbed his coat, and left without another word. The night passed in fragments. Elena lay awake beside Lily, listening to the wind rattle the windows, to the distant hum of the security system, to her own heartbeat. When sleep finally came, it brought dreams of alleys and locked doors, and Lily crying in the cold. She woke to sirens far off at first, then closer. Her body reacted before her mind, heart-slamming breath, shallow hands already reaching for Lily. The child stirred, confused. "Mommy, shh! Stay here!" Elena slipped to the window. Flashing lights reflected off the lake, blue and red pulsing across the water. Not at the gate. Not yet. She dressed quickly, pulled Lily into her arms, and carried her downstairs. Rosa met them in the foyer, face pale. "Miss Elena," Mr. Vincent called. He's been in an accident. Not serious, but he's at the hospital. He wants you to stay put." Elena's knees buckled. She caught herself on the banister. "Accident. A car. Side swiped. He's stable. Just bruised." He said Elena didn't hear the rest. The world tilted. Nausea rose sharp and hot. She sank to the floor, Lily still clutched against her chest. The child began to cry, soft, frightened sobs. Rosa knelt beside them. He's okay. Really. He'll be home soon. But Elena's mind raced backward through cold nights, through hunger, through every time she had told Lily everything will be okay when it wasn't. Now Vincent, the one person who had made okay feel possible, was hurt because of them. Because his world had brushed against theirs. She rocked Lily gently, tears streaming down her face. I'm sorry, she whispered to Lily, to Vincent, to the universe that kept taking. Hours later, the front door opened. Vincent walked in, limping coat torn at the sleeve, a fresh cut above his eyebrow taped shut. He stopped when he saw them on the foyer floor. Elena looked up. Her voice broke. You're hurt. It's nothing. He crossed the room in 3 strides, knelt despite the pain in his side. I'm here. Lily reached for him first. Vincent gathered her close, then slowly, carefully pulled Elena in too. She resisted for half a heartbeat, then collapsed against him, shoulders shaking with silent sobs. I thought, her words dissolved. I know, he murmured into her hair. I know. They stayed like that, 3 people tangled on the marble floor until the shaking eased. Vincent's arms trembled around them, not from pain, but from the sheer force of relief and terror crashing through him. He had almost lost them tonight, not to rivals, but to his own choices. The remorse was vicious now, tearing deeper than any wound. Later, when Lily slept upstairs, Vincent sat with Elena in the living room. A single lamp burned low. Rain tapped against the windows again. They knew where to find me, he said quietly. They knew about you. About Lily. Elena's breath caught. Because of us. No, his voice was fierce. Because of me. Because I let my world touch yours. She looked at him, really looked, and saw the war inside him, guilt warring with protectiveness, remorse warring with the fierce, burning need to keep them safe. I should send you away, he said. Somewhere they can't find you. Elena's heart seized. No. He stared at her. Elena, no. She reached for his hand, held it tight. We're not leaving. Not unless you make us. Vincent closed his eyes. Tears slipped from beneath his lashes, silent, unexpected. I can't lose you. You won't. He opened his eyes, looked at her with something raw, unguarded. Love, fierce, consuming, from the first moment he had seen them in that alley, surged through him like fire. It terrified him. It anchored him. He lifted her hand to his lips, pressed a kiss to her knuckles. Stay. She nodded. Tears fell freely now. We stay. Outside, the rain fell harder. Inside, in the quiet between heartbeats, the bond between them deepened, fragile, fierce, unbreakable. Vincent pulled her close again, held her as though she might vanish. And in that embrace, the walls he had built around his heart shattered completely. The crisis had come, and in its wake, something new was born, trust overwhelming and absolute, attachment passionate and burning. A family not of blood but of choice. And the choice had been made. In the stillness that followed, Vincent whispered against her hair, You're home now. Both of you. Elena believed him. For the first time in years, she let herself believe. The rain had stopped by dawn, leaving the city washed clean and glistening under a pale October sun. Inside the mansion, the air carried the faint scent of coffee and damp earth from the open terrace doors. Elena sat at the kitchen island, hands wrapped around a mug that had gone cold. Lily played quietly in the adjoining sunroom, stacking wooden blocks into towers that caught the light like small cathedrals. The child hummed softly, a tune without words, something she had invented during colder nights, when humming was the only way to keep fear at bay. Vincent entered without sound, coat already shed, sleeves rolled to his elbows. The cut above his eyebrow had darkened to a thin purple line. He moved with the careful economy of a man whose body reminded him constantly of its limits. He paused in the doorway, watching them, mother and daughter, framed by morning light, and felt the familiar tear inside his chest widen another fraction. Elena sensed him before she saw him. She turned slowly. Their eyes met across the marble expanse. Something unspoken passed between them, gratitude, fear, the fragile beginning of something neither knew how to name. You didn't sleep, she said. Not a question. Enough. He crossed to the counter, poured himself coffee, black and steaming. You, she shook her head. Not really. He set the mug down. We need to talk. Elena's fingers tightened on her own cup. About last night, about more than last night. She glanced toward the sunroom. Lily was absorbed in her blocks, oblivious. Elena nodded once. Vincent led her to the study. The door closed with a soft click. Sunlight slanted through the tall windows, painting stripes across the oak desk, the leather chairs, the framed photograph of a younger Vincent and Elena, the other Elena, smiling on a summer day that no longer existed. He did not sit. Neither did she. I've been thinking, he began, about why I couldn't let you walk away that first night. Why every time I consider sending you somewhere safer, somewhere away from me, the thought feels like a blade. Elena's breath caught. She waited. Vincent looked at her, really looked, and the words came slow, heavy. Because the moment I saw you in that alley holding Lily like she was the only thing keeping you standing, I saw myself. Not the man I am now. The man I was when I lost her. He nodded toward the photograph. My wife, Elena. She died because of choices I made. Because people like me attract danger the way light draws moths. I couldn't protect her. And when I looked at you two, I saw the same helplessness I felt then. The same failure waiting to happen. Elena's eyes filled. She pressed her lips together to keep them from trembling. But it's more than guilt, he continued. His voice dropped lower. It's you, both of you. From the first second, Lily hugged me from the first time you looked at me without flinching. Something woke up. Something I thought was dead. And it terrifies me because I don't deserve it. I don't deserve you. Elena stepped closer. Vincent, let me finish. He exhaled sharply. Last night when Marco mentioned you, when he knew your names, I realized how close I came to losing you both. Not because of rivals, because of me. Because I let my world brush against yours. And I can't, his voice cracked. I can't do that again. Elena reached out, laid her hand on his arm. You didn't lose us. Not yet. He covered her hand with his. But I will. Unless I tell you the truth. She waited. Vincent looked down at their joined hands. I'm not a good man, Elena. I run businesses, construction, real estate that look clean on paper. But underneath, there are things I've done. Things I've allowed. People have been hurt because of decisions I made. Not always directly. But the responsibility is mine. Elena's pulse thundered in her ears. She had suspected had felt the weight he carried, but hearing it aloud made the room tilt slightly. I never wanted this life, he said. It started small. Protection, money, favors. Then it grew. And by the time I understood what it cost, the cost was already too high. He lifted his eyes to hers. My wife died in a car meant for me. Crossfire from a war I helped start. I buried her. And I buried the part of me that could still feel anything. Until you, tears slipped down Elena's cheeks. She did not wipe them away. I want to keep you safe, he whispered. More than I've wanted anything in years. But to do that, I have to be honest. If you stay, if you choose to stay, you're choosing to stay near someone who carries shadows. Someone who might never be clean. Elena's knees felt weak. She leaned against the desk for support. Memories flooded her nights so cold, her fingers turned blue. Days so hungry, her stomach cramped into knots. The humiliation of begging for scraps at church pantries, while people looked through her like she was invisible. And now this man, this powerful, broken man, was offering her safety, offering Lily warmth and food and laughter, and asking only for truth in return. She looked at him. I've spent years powerless, she said softly, hungry, cold, afraid every single day that Lily would wake up one morning and I wouldn't have anything left to give her. I've been invisible. I've been nothing. Her voice trembled. And you see me? You see us. You've given us more kindness in 1 week than I've known in years. If there are shadows. I've lived in shadows. I'm not afraid of yours. Vincent's breath shuddered out. You should be. Maybe. She stepped closer. But I'm more afraid of going back to nothing. He closed the distance. Gently, carefully, he drew her into his arms. She went willingly, pressing her face against his chest. His heartbeat thundered beneath her ear, fast, unsteady, alive. I don't deserve this, he murmured into her hair. Neither do I, she whispered back. But here we are. They stood like that for a long time, two people who had lost so much, finding something fragile and real in the wreckage. Later in the quiet after lunch, Lily napped on the couch in the sunroom. Elena and Vincent sat on the terrace coats draped over their shoulders against the chill. The lake stretched silver and calm below them. Vincent spoke first. I'm going to change what I can. The parts of the business that can be cleaned, I'll clean them. The rest, I'll step back. It won't happen overnight, but I won't let my world touch yours again. Elena looked at him. You don't have to do that for us. I'm doing it for me, too. He reached for her hand. I want to be the man Lily looks at without fear. The man you look at without wondering what comes next. Tears welled again. She let them fall. Thank you. He lifted her hand, kissed her knuckles the way he had the night before. This time she did not pull away. Inside him the conflict still raged, guilt and remorse warring with hope, fear warring with love, but for the first time the hope felt stronger, brighter, burning. That evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the water gold, Lily ran out onto the terrace with a drawing clutched in her small hands. She climbed onto Vincent's lap, without hesitation pressed the paper against his chest. "Look," she said proudly. "It's us." 3 stick figures stood in front of a big house. One tall, one medium, one small, all holding hands. Above them a sun with a smiley face. Vincent stared at the drawing until his vision blurred. He wrapped one arm around Lily, the other around Elena, held them both close. For the first time in 8 years, the hollow place inside him did not ache. It filled, slowly, painfully, beautifully, with them, and in that quiet golden moment, Vincent Russo understood that redemption was not something you earned. It was something you chose. Every single day, he chose them, and they, against every reason, against every fear, chose him back. The final days of October 2025 arrived in Chicago with a brittle clarity, leaves stripped from the trees, sky a high cold blue, the lake reflecting steel instead of silver. Inside the mansion, the warmth held steady. Fires crackled in the hearths. Soup simmered on the stove. Lily's laughter floated from room to room, like music no one had played in years. Elena began to move through the house with less hesitation. She no longer flinched at every creak of floorboards, no longer folded, borrowed clothes as though they might be reclaimed at any moment. She helped Rosa in the kitchen, not because she had to, but because the simple act of chopping vegetables beside another person felt like reclaiming a piece of herself she had lost to hunger and cold. Vincent watched the change in her the way a man watches dawn after a long night. Each small gesture, Elena reaching for a mug without asking permission, Lily climbing onto his lap to show him a new drawing, widened the crack in his chest until light poured through. He found himself lingering in doorways longer, listening to their voices, memorizing the cadence of their breathing. Love had taken root in him so completely. It felt like another organ, vital, aching, impossible to ignore. From the first instant he had seen them in that alley, the feeling had burned fierce, protective, consuming. Now it scorched. He began to carve out time he had never allowed himself before. Mornings he stayed longer at the breakfast table, watching Lily spread jam on toast with careful concentration. Afternoons he walked the garden paths with Elena, while Lily ran ahead chasing fallen leaves. Evenings he read aloud from the library shelves, simple stories of animals and brave children, his deep voice softening at the edges as Lily leaned against his side. Each moment felt stolen from a life he had not earned, yet he could not stop taking them. The garden became their quiet sanctuary. One crisp afternoon, Vincent knelt beside Lily in the small herb bed behind the terrace, showing her how to press thyme leaves between her fingers until the scent rose sharp and green. Elena watched from the stone bench coat pulled tight against the wind. She had gained a little weight, her cheeks less hollow, her eyes brighter, but the memory of starvation still lived in her bones. She remembered nights when the hunger clawed so deep she could not sleep, when she pressed her palm to Lily's small back and lied that tomorrow would bring food. The contrast now, the scent of fresh earth, the warmth of sunlight on stone, Vincent's patient hands guiding Lily's, made her dizzy. Tears came without warning. She wiped them quickly, afraid he would see. He did see. He always did. Vincent rose, brushed soil from his knees, and crossed to her. He sat beside her on the bench, close enough that their shoulders touched far enough to give her space if she needed it. "You're crying," he said gently. Elena shook her head, then laughed a small, broken sound. "I'm happy. It hurts more than I expected." He reached for her hand, threaded his fingers through hers. "I know." She looked at their joined hands, his broad and scarred, hers thin and trembling. "I used to dream of moments like this. Not mansions or gardens, just safety. Someone who stayed." Her voice cracked. "And now it's real, and I'm terrified it will disappear." Vincent's throat tightened. "It won't. How can you promise that? Because I'm choosing it. Every day. The same way I choose to breathe." Elena leaned her head against his shoulder. For the first time, she allowed herself to rest there fully, no holding back, no bracing for the fall. The trust was overwhelming now, passionate, burning a flame that warmed places inside her she had thought frozen forever. But the world outside the gates did not pause. Trouble came on a Tuesday. Vincent received the call at dawn, Tommy's voice clipped and urgent. They're at the Northside warehouse again. This time they brought muscle. No guns visible, but they're blocking the loading docks. They want you there. Now. Vincent dressed in silence, kissed Lily's sleeping forehead, paused at Elena's door. She was awake, sitting up in bed, eyes wide in the dim light. "Stay inside," he said, "no matter what." She nodded. "Come back." He crossed the room in 2 strides, cupped her face in both hands, pressed his forehead to hers. "I will." The confrontation unfolded in the gray half-light of early morning. The warehouse loomed squat and brick against the skyline. 4 cars blocked the entrance engines, idling headlights cutting through mist. Marco stepped out first, flanked by 3 others. No weapons drawn. Not yet. Vincent got out alone. Tommy stayed in the SUV, hand near the radio. "You're persistent," Vincent said. Marco smiled thinly. "You're distracted. Word is you've gone soft." taking in strays, playing house. Vincent's jaw clenched. You've been watching. We watch everything. Marco tilted his head. Pretty woman, little girl. They look happy. Be a shame if something changed that. The threat landed like ice water. Vincent felt the old rage rise cold, precise, but beneath it burned something hotter terror. Not for himself. For them. He stepped forward until he was inches from Marco. Voice low. You touch them, you die slow. That's not a threat. That's a fact. Marco studied him, saw the shift the man who once negotiated from strength, now negotiating from fear. He backed off a single step. We'll see. They left. Engines roared. Taillights faded into the mist. Vincent stood motionless until the air cleared. Then he returned to the SUV, hands shaking so violently he could barely grip the door. Back home, he found Elena waiting in the foyer. She took one look at his face and crossed to him without a word, wrapped her arms around his waist, held tight. You're shaking, she whispered. He buried his face in her hair. They threatened you. Lily, by name. Elena stiffened, then sagged against him. Because of me. No. He pulled back, cupped her face. Because of me. Because I let danger near you. Tears spilled down her cheeks. Then send us away. If it keeps us safe. No. The word tore from him. I won't lose you. I can't. She searched his eyes. Saw the war inside him, remorse crashing against love, guilt warring with the fierce need to protect. What do we do? Vincent exhaled. I end it. The parts of my life that invite this, I end them. Whatever it costs. Elena's heart pounded. You'll lose everything. I've already lost everything once. He brushed her tears away with his thumbs. I won't lose you both. Not for money. Not for power. Not for anything. She rose on her toes, pressed her forehead to his. We're with you. Vincent closed his eyes, felt the shift inside him, violent, complete. The man who had built walls of control was choosing vulnerability. Choosing them. That night after Lily slept, they sat on the terrace under blankets. The city glittered below. Vincent held Elena's hand against his chest, so she could feel his heartbeat steady now, sure. I love you, he said quietly. The words came without hesitation, without fear. Both of you. From the first moment. It's burned in me ever since. Elena's breath caught. Tears shimmered. I love you too. He kissed her, then slow, gentle, reverent. Not claiming. Cherishing. Inside him, the conflict still flickered. Remorse for the past, fear for the future, but love drowned it out. Love fierce enough to rebuild from ashes. And in the quiet that followed, with Elena's head on his shoulder, and the lake breathing softly below, Vincent understood that family was not inherited. It was chosen, fought for, protected, every single day. And he would fight. He would protect, until his last breath. The first week of November 2025 brought frost to the windows of the mansion, thin silver patterns that caught the morning light like fragile lace. Inside, the house felt warmer than it ever had. Fires burned low and steady in the hearths. The scent of cinnamon from Rosa's baking drifted through the halls, and Lily's voice carried songs she had learned from Vincent's quiet, reading sessions. Elena moved through these days with a tentative lightness she had not known she could possess. She no longer counted the days until the other shoe dropped. Instead, she allowed herself small acts of belonging, folding laundry in the sunlit laundry room, arranging fresh flowers from the market on the dining table, sitting beside Vincent on the terrace at dusk, while Lily chased fireflies that had somehow lingered past autumn. Vincent watched her bloom and felt the love inside him expand, until it pressed painfully against his ribs. It was no longer a spark. It was a furnace. Every glance she gave him, every soft thank you when he handed her a cup of tea, every time, Lily climbed into his lap and called him Vinny. Without hesitation, it all fed the fire. He had never known love could hurt this much and still feel like salvation. But the shadows he had tried to outrun were closing in. The call came on a Thursday evening. Vincent was in the study reviewing legitimate contracts, real estate closings, construction bids he intended to keep clean when his private line rang. Tommy's number, he answered immediately. Boss. Tommy's voice was wrong, too calm, too careful. We need to meet. Now. The old boathouse on the lakefront. Alone. Vincent's hand tightened on the phone. Why alone? Trust me. It's important. He ended the call. Looked toward the hallway where Elena was reading to Lily on the couch, her voice soft, melodic, the child nestled against her side. The sight anchored him. He crossed to them quietly. I have to step out, he said. Elena looked up. Her eyes searched his face. How long? An hour. Maybe 2. He knelt beside the couch, brushed Lily's hair from her forehead. Stay inside. Lock the doors. Lily reached up and hugged his neck. Come back soon, Vinny. He held her a moment longer than necessary. I will, sweetheart. Elena walked him to the foyer. At the door, she touched his arm. Be careful. Vincent covered her hand with his. Always. The boathouse stood at the edge of the estate's private pier, old wood, weathered gray windows dark. Vincent arrived on foot, leaving the SUV at the gate. The wind off the lake carried the smell of algae and coming winter. He stepped inside. Tommy waited near the far wall, hands in his coat pockets. The only light came from a single bulb overhead, swaying slightly. You're late, Tommy said. Vincent stopped 10 feet away. Talk, Tommy exhaled. I've been thinking. Long time. You're changing, boss. Softening. The crew sees it. The other families see it. You're distracted. Vulnerable. Vincent's stomach turned cold. Say it. Tommy met his eyes. I told them. Marco. The North Side crew. Where you'd be weak. Where you'd hurt most. The words landed like a physical blow. Vincent felt the air leave his lungs. Tommy, who had stood beside him for 15 years, who had carried messages, taken bullets, shared late-night bourbon after the worst nights had sold him out. Why, Vincent's voice was barely above a whisper. Tommy's face twisted. Because you're throwing it all away. For what? A woman and a kid who showed up in an alley. You built this empire. We built it. And now you want to walk clean, leave us holding the pieces. Vincent took one step forward. You think betrayal fixes that, I think survival does. Tommy pulled his hand from his pocket. A small pistol glinted in the dim light. They're waiting outside. You come quiet, they let the woman and the girl live. You fight, they don't. Vincent stared at the gun. Then at Tommy's face, the man he had once called brother. The remorse that had lived in him for years surged, now mixed with a fresh, searing pain. He had trusted this man with his life. With everything. And Tommy had chosen power over loyalty. Vincent's voice came low, steady. You know me better than that. Tommy raised the pistol. Don't make me. Vincent moved fast, practiced. He closed the distance in 2 strides, knocked the gun aside with his forearm, drove his fist into Tommy's stomach. The pistol clattered to the floorboards. Tommy doubled over, gasping. Vincent pinned him against the wall. You sold us out. For what? A bigger cut, a seat at Marco's table, Tommy coughed. For the life you're throwing away. Vincent's grip tightened, then loosened. He stepped back. Get out. Tommy stared. What? Get out of my city. Tonight, if I see you again, I won't be this generous. Tommy straightened slowly, looked at Vincent like he was seeing him for the first time. Then he turned and walked out into the night. Vincent stood alone in the boathouse. The bulb swayed above him. He felt the betrayal like a fresh wound, deeper than any bullet, more painful than any loss he had known. Tommy had been family, and family had turned. He walked back to the house slowly. The wind cut through his coat. When he entered the foyer, Elena was waiting, pale eyes wide. You're hurt, she said, seeing the blood on his knuckles. Not mine. He crossed to her, pulled her into his arms without a word, held her so tightly she gasped. Vincent Tommy, he whispered against her hair. He betrayed us. Told them everything. Elena stiffened. Then her arms came around him. But you're here. Barely. She pulled back, cupped his face. What happened? He told her, quiet, halting. The confrontation. The gun. The choice not to end it with violence. When he finished, tears stood in his eyes. I trusted him, he said, with everything, and he chose them over us. Elena wiped his tears with her thumbs. He chose wrong. Vincent looked at her, thin, scarred by years of hunger and cold, yet standing here offering him comfort. The love surged again, fierce, protective, overwhelming. I almost lost you because of my world, because of people I let close. You didn't lose us. She pressed her forehead to his. We're here. Lily appeared at the top of the stairs, rubbing her eyes. Vincent knelt, opened his arms. Lily ran down and threw herself against him. He held her close, breathing in the scent of her shampoo, clean, safe. I'm sorry, he whispered to both of them, for bringing this near you. Elena knelt beside them, wrapped her arms around them both. You didn't bring it. You protected us from it. In that moment, 3 people holding each other in the foyer, the betrayal's pain reached its peak. Vincent felt it tear through him, remorse for trusting the wrong man, guilt for the danger he had invited, terror at how close he had come to losing the only family he had ever truly wanted. But beneath the pain burned something stronger. Love. Fierce. Unbreakable. He lifted his head, looked at Elena. I'm ending it. All of it. The shadows. The deals. Whatever it takes. She nodded. Tears shimmered. We'll be here. Vincent pulled them both closer, held them as though they were the only solid thing left in his world. And in the quiet that followed, with Lily's small hand on his cheek and Elena's heartbeat against his chest, he made the choice, not out of weakness, out of strength. He would burn the old life down. For them. For the family he had chosen. And nothing, not betrayal, not rivals, not his own past, would take that from him again. November deepened in Chicago, the days growing shorter until darkness seemed to arrive before the afternoon had properly begun. Frost etched permanent patterns on the mansion windows, and the lake turned the color of gunmetal beneath a sky that rarely showed sun. Inside, however, the house resisted the cold. Fires burned steadily in every grate, thick quilts draped over armchairs, and the scent of cinnamon and vanilla lingered from Rosa's morning baking. Lily had taken to wearing the soft wool sweaters Vincent had quietly ordered, oversized on her small frame but warm enough that she no longer shivered even when she ran barefoot across the marble floors. Elena carried herself differently now. The sharp edges of hunger had softened. Color had returned to her cheeks, and her eyes no longer held the constant shadow of exhaustion. Yet the memory of deprivation remained etched in her movements, the way she still portioned food carefully onto plates, the way she folded every napkin as though it might be the last, the way she sometimes paused mid-step and pressed a hand to her stomach as though bracing for an old familiar ache that no longer existed. Vincent noticed these small echoes of her past every day. Each one deepened the ache inside him, the knowledge that she had endured years of cold nights, empty cupboards, and the crushing humiliation of being invisible while he lived behind walls of stone and money. The love he felt for her burned hotter with every reminder, a fierce, protective flame that consumed guilt and remorse in equal measure. He had begun dismantling the shadows of his former life, quiet meetings with lawyers to sever ties with the less legitimate holdings, conversations with trusted men about stepping away entirely, but the process was slow and the danger had not yet receded. One morning, Elena woke feeling different. A faint nausea curled in her stomach, not violent but persistent. She sat on the edge of the bed for several minutes, hand pressed to her abdomen, counting backward through weeks that had blurred together in warmth and safety. When the realization settled, it arrived not with panic but with a quiet, trembling wonder. She found Vincent in the study papers spread across the desk, final documents that would sever his last connections to the world he had once ruled. He looked up as she entered, concern flashing across his face at the paleness of her cheeks. Elena, she closed the door softly behind her, crossed to him on unsteady legs. When she reached the desk, she placed both hands flat on the wood to steady herself. "I'm pregnant," she said. The words hung between them. Vincent stared at her. For several heartbeats he did not move. Then the color drained from his face. "Pregnant." She nodded. Tears shimmered in her eyes. "I think 6 weeks, maybe 7. He rose slowly, chair scraping against the floor, reached across the desk and took her hands. His own were trembling. "Are you sure I took 3 tests this morning? All the same." Vincent exhaled a sound that was half sob, half laughter. He came around the desk and pulled her into his arms, held her so tightly she felt his heartbeat thunder against her own. "A baby," he whispered against her hair. "Our baby." Elena clung to him, joy and terror, tangled inside her joy, at the miracle of new life terror, at how fragile it all still felt. She had once slept on concrete, cradling Lily through nights so cold her teeth chattered until dawn. She had once stood in food lines for hours, only to be told there was nothing left. And now she carried a child in a house of warmth and safety, loved by a man who had once seemed like a stranger from another world. The joy hurt as much as the memories. Vincent pulled back far enough to look at her. Tears stood in his eyes. "I never thought," his voice broke. "I never thought I'd have this again. A family. A future." Elena cupped his face. "We do. We have it now." But the world outside had not finished testing them. 2 days later, the call came, Marco's voice on a blocked number, calm and cold. "Congratulations, Russo. Heard you're expecting. Be a shame if something happened before the happy day." Vincent ended the call without speaking. His hand shook so violently the phone clattered to the desk. Elena found him in the study minutes later, pale, breathing hard, staring at nothing. "What is it?" he told her. Every word carved deeper lines into his face. "They know," he said. "They know about the baby." Elena's knees gave way. She sank into the nearest chair, one hand instinctively covering her stomach. Nausea rose again, this time from fear, not hormones. She felt dizzy, the room tilting slightly. Memories of cold nights flooded back, nights when she had held Lily and whispered promises she could not keep. Now, another child, another life depending on her, on him. Vincent knelt in front of her, took both her hands. "I won't let them near you," he said. "Any of you." "How?" Her voice cracked. "They know where we are. They know everything." Vincent's jaw tightened. "Then we end it. Tonight." He left an hour later, alone, unarmed, carrying only the weight of his decision. The meeting was set at an abandoned pier on the south side, neutral ground, or so Marco claimed. Elena waited in the foyer, wrapped in a blanket, Lily asleep upstairs. Every tick of the grandfather clock felt like a hammer against her ribs. She paced. Saturday paced again. Her mind spun with images of Vincent bleeding on concrete, of Lily waking to find him gone, of the new life inside her never knowing its father. Hours passed. Then the front door opened. Vincent stepped inside, coat torn, lip split, but walking under his own power. Behind him, two of his remaining loyal men carried a bound and gagged Marco between them. The rival boss's eyes were wide with shock. Vincent looked at Elena. It's over. She crossed the foyer in a run, threw herself against him. He caught her, held her tight despite the pain in his ribs. They're finished, he said against her hair. Marco signed papers tonight, witnessed legal, full withdrawal from the city. The rest of his crew is scattering. I gave them no choice. Elena pulled back. How Vincent glanced at Marco now, being led downstairs to the safe room until authorities could be quietly involved. I offered them a way out. Clean money, new cities, no retaliation. They took it. Tears streamed down Elena's face. I could have ended it the old way. His voice was rough, but I chose different. For you, for Lily, for the baby. She pressed her forehead to his chest, sobbed quietly. Vincent lifted her chin, kissed her slow, tender, reverent. I love you, he whispered. All three of you. Months later, spring arriving late, but certain the mansion garden bloomed with tulips and daffodils. Elena sat on the stone bench, one hand resting on the gentle swell of her belly. Lily ran circles around them, laughing as Vincent chased her with exaggerated slowness. Elena watched them, her daughter, her love, the father she had chosen for both children she carried, and felt the last remnants of fear dissolve. Vincent caught Lily, swung her onto his shoulders, and walked to the bench, sat beside Elena. Lily slid down between them. He placed his hand over Elena's on her stomach, felt the small flutter beneath. She's strong, he said softly. Elena smiled through tears. Like her father. Vincent looked at her, really looked, and the love in his eyes was so fierce it stole her breath. Thank you, he whispered, for choosing me, for giving me this. Elena leaned against him. Thank you for staying. In the quiet garden with Lily humming between them, and the baby moving gently beneath their joined hands, Vincent felt the final piece fall into place. Redemption was not erasure. It was presence. It was choice. It was love, persistent, burning, healing. And in that moment, surrounded by the family he had almost lost, and would now protect forever, Vincent Russo was finally whole. Winter arrived in Chicago without apology. By mid-December, 2025 snow blanketed the city in heavy muffling layers, turning the streets into silent white corridors and the lake into a frozen mirror. Inside the mansion, the warmth held fast, evergreen garlands draped the banisters, candles flickered on every surface, and the scent of pine and cinnamon wrapped around every breath. Lily had taken to stringing paper snowflakes across the tall windows, her small hands careful, precise, as though each one were a promise she was determined to keep. Elena watched her daughter with a tenderness that still caught in her throat. The swell of her pregnancy was unmistakable now, rounding her frame softly beneath loose sweaters. She moved more slowly these days, one hand often resting instinctively on her belly, as though anchoring herself to the miracle growing inside her. Vincent had become a different man in the quiet weeks since Marco's surrender. The sharp edges of his former life had dulled, not vanished, but blunted by choice. He spent mornings at the breakfast table, instead of in hurried meetings, afternoons walking the snowy garden paths with Lily on his shoulders, evenings sitting beside Elena on the terrace, under thick wool blankets, while the city glittered, below like scattered diamonds. Every touch between them carried weight, now his hand on the small of her back as they climbed stairs, her fingers threading through his when they sat together on the couch. Lily climbing between them to read stories aloud in her clear piping voice. Love had settled into him like roots finding soil after years of stone. It was no longer a flame that threatened to consume. It was steady heat, warming places he had long thought dead. Yet the past refused to stay buried. The first sign came on a Tuesday evening. Vincent's phone vibrated on the kitchen counter, while he helped Lily decorate gingerbread cookies. He glanced at the screen, unknown number, and silenced it. Minutes later it rang again. He stepped into the hallway to answer. Marco's voice, low-controlled, came through the line. You thought paper and promises would end this. Russo. Vincent's grip tightened on the phone. You signed. You left. I left the city. Not the game. A pause. Your new family looks happy. Be a shame if the little girl lost her new daddy before Christmas. The line went dead. Vincent stood motionless in the shadowed hallway. Snow tapped against the window panes like impatient fingers. Inside him, the old rage stirred cold familiar, but it was drowned by something far more violent terror. Pure, paralyzing terror for Lily. For Elena. For the unborn child, who had already become the center of his every thought. He returned to the kitchen. Elena looked up from piping icing on a star-shaped cookie. Her smile faltered when she saw his face. Vincent, he forced a calm he did not feel. Everything's fine. She did not believe him, but she did not press, not yet. That night, after Lily slept, Elena found him on the terrace. Snow fell in slow, heavy flakes. He stood at the railing without a coat, shoulders rigid. She wrapped a blanket around him from behind, pressed her cheek to his back. "Tell me." He turned, pulled her close, buried his face in her hair. "They're back," he whispered. "Marco. He wants one last move." Elena's breath caught. "What kind?" He threatened Lily. By name. She went still, then began to tremble, not from cold. From memory. From the sudden, vivid recollection of nights when she had held Lily in abandoned doorways, whispering lies about safety while hunger gnawed at them both. Now another threat. Another shadow reaching for her child. Vincent felt her shaking, held her tighter. "I won't let him near her. Near any of you." "How do you stop him, Vincent?" Exhaled a ragged sound. "I end it. Face to face. Tonight." Elena pulled back, looked up at him. Tears froze on her lashes. "No! Elena, you promised." Her voice cracked. "You promised no more violence, no more risking yourself." "I'm not risking. I'm protecting." She cupped his face. "You are our protection. If something happens to you, it won't." She searched his eyes, saw the war inside him, remorse for the life he had lived, terror for the life he had found love so fierce it bordered on pain. "Then take me with you," she said. He stared. "Absolutely not. If you go alone and don't come back, I'll never forgive myself for letting you walk out that door." Vincent closed his eyes, pressed his forehead to hers. "I can't lose you," he whispered. "Then don't go alone." In the end, they compromised. Vincent called two of his most trusted remaining men who had already committed to the clean transition. They would stay close, watch from distance, intervene only if necessary. Elena insisted on coming to the edge of the meeting place. Not inside, but close enough to see him return. They drove in silence through the snow-silent streets. Lily stayed home, with Rosa tucked in with extra blankets and strict instructions not to wake. The meeting was set at an empty warehouse near the river, same one where Tommy had pulled the gun. Irony Vincent could taste like blood. He stepped out of the car. Snow crunched under his boots. Elena remained inside windows, fogging from her breath, hands pressed to the glass. Marco waited under a single floodlight. Alone. No visible backup. That alone set Vincent's nerves on edge. "You came," Marco said. Vincent stopped 10 feet away. "You threatened my daughter. Your daughter now, is she?" Marco's smile was thin. "Convenient." Vincent's hands flexed at his sides. "State your terms." "No terms." Marco stepped closer. "Just a message. You walk away from the city tonight permanently, or the girl doesn't see spring." Vincent felt the world narrow to a single point. Rage, fear, love. All of it colliding inside him until he could barely breathe. Then he heard tires on snow, too many approaching fast. Marco's smile widened. "You really thought I'd come alone?" 3 cars slid into view, headlights cutting through falling snow. Doors opened. Men stepped out. Not Marco's usual crew. Hired muscle. Faces Vincent did not recognize. He took 1 step back. Then he heard Elena's car door open. She stepped out, coat loose over her swollen belly face, pale but resolute. Elena Vincent's voice cracked. She walked toward him through the snow. Slow, steady, every step deliberate. Marco's smile faltered. "What is this?" Elena stopped beside Vincent, slipped her hand into his. "This is family," she said quietly. Her voice carried across the cold air, soft, steady, unbreakable. "You don't touch family." The men hesitated, looked to Marco. Vincent felt Elena trembling beside him, felt the courage it took for her to stand here, once invisible, once powerless, now refusing to be either. He squeezed her hand. Then he stepped forward, placing himself between her and the threat. "You want me," he said to Marco. "You deal with me, but you don't touch them. Ever." Marco studied them, man and woman standing together in the snow, hand in hand, unflinching. Something shifted in his expression. Not defeat, recognition. "You're really done," Marco said. Vincent nodded once. "I'm done." Marco exhaled, looked at his men, then back at Vincent. "Fine," he said. "We're gone. For good this time," he signaled. Cars reversed. Headlights retreated into the dark. Marco lingered a moment longer, looked at Elena. "You're braver than he is," he said. Then he turned and disappeared into the snow. Vincent stood motionless until the last taillight vanished. Then he turned to Elena, pulled her into his arms so tightly she gasped. "You're shaking," he whispered. "So are you." He buried his face in her hair, felt tears freeze on his cheeks. "I thought I'd lose you," he said. "All of you." Elena held him tighter. "You didn't." They stood in the falling snow, two people who had once been strangers in an alley, now unbreakable. When they returned home, Lily waited at the top of the stairs, eyes wide, Bear clutched tight. Vincent climbed the steps, knelt, opened his arms. Lily ran to him. He lifted her high-pressed kisses to her cheeks. "I'm home," he said. She wrapped her arms around his neck. "I knew you'd come back." Elena joined them, wrapped her arms around both. In the quiet foyer, snow melting on the rug, firelight flickering on the walls, Vincent felt the last chain break. He was free. Not because the threats had vanished, but because he had chosen something greater. Love, family, a future built not on power but on presence. He looked at Elena over Lily's head. "Marry me," he whispered. Tears shimmered in her eyes. "Yes," she answered, and in that single word, the past released its final hold. They were whole. They were home. They were forever. Winter lingered in Chicago well into the new year of 2026, but inside the mansion on the Gold Coast the cold could not reach. Sunlight poured through tall windows onto polished floors, catching on the silver frames of new photographs that had begun to appear along the hallway walls. Lily laughing in a snowdrift, Elena radiant, with her hand resting on the curve of her belly, Vincent kneeling beside them both in the garden the previous autumn, his usually guarded face softened into something almost unrecognizable peace. Grace arrived on a quiet February morning, just as the first crocuses pushed through the last patches of snow in the garden beds. The labor was long but gentle. Elena breathed through every contraction with Vincent's hand clasped tightly in hers, his voice steady even when tears tracked silently down his cheeks. When the midwife finally placed the tiny dark-haired girl against Elena's chest, the room seemed to hold its breath. Grace gave one small, indignant cry, then quieted as though she already recognized the arms holding her. Vincent leaned over them, both trembling. He touched one careful finger to Grace's cheek, soft, impossibly soft, and felt the last remaining wall inside his heart dissolve completely. This child had been conceived in the shadow of his old life, and born into the light of the new one he had chosen. She was not merely a symbol of healing. She was proof that broken things could become whole again. Lily tiptoed into the room an hour later, eyes wide with wonder. She climbed carefully onto the bed and peered at her new sister. "She's so little," Lily whispered. Vincent lifted her gently so she could see better. "She's perfect," he said, voice thick. "Just like you." Lily reached out one small finger. Grace's tiny hand closed around it instinctively. The sight undid Vincent all over again. He pressed his lips to Lily's temple, then to Elena's forehead, then light as a breath to Grace's downy head. "You saved me," he murmured, to all three of them. "All three of you. From the very first night in that alley, you saved me." Elena looked up at him, tears shimmering. "We saved each other." In the weeks that followed, the house filled with new rhythms, midnight feedings, where Vincent walked the halls, with Grace cradled against his shoulder, humming songs he had never known he remembered. Mornings when Lily insisted on helping change diapers, her small face serious with responsibility. Quiet afternoons when Elena nursed Grace in the sunroom, while Vincent sat beside her, one arm around her shoulders, the other hand resting protectively over Lily's, as the girl read picture books aloud. The past did not vanish. Vincent still woke sometimes in the dark heart pounding from dreams of alleys and guns and betrayal. But now when the memories came, he rose and walked to the nursery. He stood over Grace's crib and watched her breathe, small chest rising and falling in perfect trust, and the terror receded. He crossed to Lily's room next, smoothing her blanket, brushing hair from her forehead. Then he returned to Elena, sliding beneath the covers to hold her close until the shaking stopped. He had stepped fully away from the shadows. The legitimate businesses, construction real estate, were restructured under new management. The men who had once carried weapons now carried blueprints. Marco and the remnants of his crew had disappeared from the city entirely. Whether by choice or quiet pressure, no one asked. Vincent no longer needed to ask. He had chosen a different currency: presence, protection, love. One spring afternoon, April 2026, the family gathered in the garden. Tulips stood in bright rows, daffodils nodded in the breeze. Lily ran ahead, chasing butterflies. Elena walked slowly beside Vincent, Grace asleep in a sling against her chest. The sun was warm on their skin. Vincent stopped beneath the old oak at the garden center. He turned to Elena. "I never thought I'd have this," he said quietly. "A real home. A real family. I spent years building walls so high nothing could touch me. Then you walked through the gate, cold, hungry, carrying everything you owned in one torn backpack, and you tore every wall down without even trying." Elena smiled through sudden tears. You gave us shelter when no one else would. You saw us when the rest of the world looked through us." He reached into his pocket, brought out a small velvet box, opened it. Inside lay 3 simple gold bands, each engraved with a tiny heart. "I want to make it official," he said. "Not because the law requires it, because my heart already decided the night I carried you both out of that alley." Elena's breath caught. She looked at Lily, who had run back and now stood watching with wide eyes. Vincent knelt first to Lily. "Lily Harper," he said softly, "you trusted me when you had every reason not to. You taught me what it means to be chosen. Will you let me be your dad? Not just in my heart, but in every way that matters." Lily's lip trembled. Then she threw her arms around his neck. "Yes, Vinny, yes." He slid the smallest ring onto her finger, a promise ring delicate and perfect. She beamed through tears. Then he turned to Elena. "Elena," he said, voice rough with emotion, "you walked into my life carrying nothing but courage, and a little girl who still believed in kindness. You showed me that love isn't something you earn, it's something you choose every single day. Will you marry me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life protecting you, cherishing you, loving you and our girls with everything I have?" Elena's tears fell freely now. She nodded. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes." He rose, slipped the ring onto her finger, pulled her close, kissed her slow, deep reverent while Lily danced around them laughing, and Grace stirred in the sling with a small, contented sigh. In that garden under the oak that had stood witness to so many of their quiet moments, they became a family in every way the word could mean. And in the stillness that followed, Lily running ahead again, Elena's hand in Vincent's grace breathing softly against her mother's heart, Vincent felt the final piece settle into place. He had once believed power was the only currency that mattered. Now he knew knowledge was deeper than power, that lesson after lesson had taught him compassion outweighs control, that education of the heart matters more than education of the streets, that another lesson in humility reshaped everything he thought he understood about strength, that true knowledge comes from listening to the people you love, that every lesson in forgiveness is worth more than any empire, that real education begins when you choose kindness over fear, that knowledge of another person's pain can heal your own, and that the greatest lesson of all is that love, regardless of skin color, wealth, or past, cannot be separated by poverty or power. To everyone watching this video today, may you carry good health in your body, joy in your days, and deep peace in your heart every single morning when you wake. If this story touched something inside you, if it reminded you of second chances of chosen family of love that sees past circumstance, please subscribe to the channel, give this video a like, and share it with someone who needs to hear that redemption is possible. Tell us in the comments, how does this story connect to your own life? Have you ever been given a second chance? Have you ever chosen love over fear? Share whatever emotions rise up from deep in your heart. I read every comment and I promise to love. Listen. Thank you for being here with me today. Goodbye for now. And I'll see you again in the next video. Disclaimer. All stories on this channel are fictional and created solely for entertainment purposes. Any resemblance to real people, events, or places is purely coincidental.